Hi, I'm Femi OK. Russia's war with Ukraine is heading into the coldest months of the year. And as Ukraine has regained territory formerly held by Russian forces, Russia is now turning its attention to attacking power plants and power lines. Of course, for civilians, this means less electricity, less power, less heat. Al Jazeera's Rory Challenz reported from Kiev earlier this week, and this is what he wants to share about winter in Ukraine and how Ukrainians are coping.
Whereas in the warmer months, you'd probably be okay living in a building like this with blown out windows or a damaged roof. When the temperature plummets, such conditions really take their toll. Metal cabins house some whose homes are uninhabitable, but their mains powered, so in the frequent blackouts, they quickly become refrigerators. Valentina is trying to stay positive.
It could be worse compared to our boys in the trenches. They're freezing. I keep active during the day, but last night it was a bit scary when the lights went off. I put on my hat, my hood. The electricity was off from 1 until 9 p.m.
Joining the stream today, we have Rory, we have Maladena, and also have Maria. Good to have all three of you with us, bringing us your expertise. Rory, please say hello to our audience around the world. I know they know you're reporting. Remind them who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Al Jazeera correspondent. I have been for many, many years. For a good number of those years, I was out in Moscow as Al Jazeera's Russia reporter. I was there from 2014 to 2018, so saw a lot of stuff happening in that time. Most recently, I've been out in Ukraine, and that's where I am at the moment. I'm in Kiev. This is the second of my trips here. I've been here on the second trip for a couple of weeks. And I was here in about a month ago as well. So, I've seen a lot of what's happened in the sort of autumn campaign of this war.
We'll get back to you in just a moment. Maladena, it's so good to have you. Please introduce yourself to our audience around the world.
Hello, my name is Mladena Kachuret, and I'm the former Deputy Minister of Health of Ukraine. I currently work in a medical network, the private medical network that has its facilities all over Kiev and Kiev region. And my husband is serving in the Ukrainian army, so he's currently located in the Donetsk region.
Thank you for joining us. And Maria, welcome to the stream. Welcome to the stream studio.
Thank you
so good
so
to
much.
have you here in person. Please say hello to our audience around the world.
Hello, friends. My name is Maria Mezantseva. I'm the member of Ukrainian Parliament representing the city of Kharkiv. I'm also deputy head of European Integration Committee and the chairwoman of Ukrainian delegation to the Council of Europe.
So, Maria, I've heard this phrase quite a lot. Russia is weaponizing winter. What does that mean for Ukrainians?
All these events which we are currently living on daily basis is definitely an energy genocide. These attacks are proven to be not very efficient because we are repairing things very smoothly and very fast. I will give you just one number. So a day ago, 70 rockets were launched across different regions of Ukraine, specifically targeting energy infrastructure, critical infrastructure, as you've rightly said, to leave the population without electricity, heating, etc. Only 10 were successful. So basically, we would say 90% of them are hit by our air defense. We can imagine what could have happened if all of them would arrive. People are very courageous. As that very lady in the video of Rory, there are so many million of people like that who are staying in their homes, regardless difficult circumstances of this winter, which is not the coldest one, by the way. And they do not want to relocate. So my colleagues across the globe are asking, are we expecting any broader waves of temporarily relocated persons? We don't think so, because we are receiving the help from international community in terms of radiators, generators, to keep the systems going. Of course, we've expected these targets of critical infrastructure even in summer. We were trying to prepare ourselves for that. But you can't be prepared to witnessing terrorism on a daily basis. And that's why you can't get used to this. And this is not normal. And this is a result of an act of aggression, which is a crime against humanity.
Let's just find out how prepared
Exactly.
people are. Yeah, Martin, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. I just want to confirm that, it is like the largest terroristic attack ever experienced in the history. When you've got a 40 million country being terrorized on a daily basis by another country. So I just completely agree with Maria.
Dana, when you talked about your husband serving in the Ukrainian army, you rolled your eyes. I don't even know if you noticed that you did it, but it must be, I can imagine why you would do that, but it must be a huge drain to have a family member serving one place and you working in another place. What do you know about the conditions that he is serving in, that he's working in? Because if you're losing power in Kyiv, what's happening where the forces are fighting?
Well, there is no electricity mostly on the entire front line, so they have to use also power banks and fuel generators, and also they need some, equipment like stoves to actually get their facilities warm. They need to have warm uniform, waterproof uniform, because it's quite tough to stay in the weather when it's raining all the time, and afterwards the temperature is getting below zero. So it's kind of challenging, and it's an additional challenge. Mm-hmm. However, they are staying alive. They are fighting. They are not going to surrender in spite of all the difficulties they face. And they will not go back at under any circumstances.
All right, if you're watching live right now, our YouTube comments are open. You can ask Rory, Modena, Maria, any question you want to know about what's happening in Ukraine right now with the Russian war in Ukraine. Rory, morale. How would you describe morale? You've been in Ukraine. This is your second tour of duty now. What's the difference?
Well, the difference this time compared to when I was here before is this situation with electricity, with heating, and with water. At the end of my last trip here, that was when the first of these kind of volleys of cruise missiles came in and took out a big chunk of the energy grid. In the weeks after that, after I'd left, there were more and more and more that came, and gradually over time Ukraine's power systems were degraded to the point where much of the country was living through big parts of each day without access to heating, electricity, water, etc. And that does take its toll. It is very, very hard for people here. You saw in my report there Valentina, who's living in her metal cabin. She's living in a metal cabin because her home was destroyed at the beginning of the war. This cabin is where she now spends all her time. It's her lifeline, but it's just hooked up to the grid. So when the power goes, as I said in my report there, it quickly becomes an icebox. It's got problems with mildew, as lots of these metal cabins do. It's not a very nice way of living. There are other effects that this has had. I was in a hospital the other day, and we were filming with a 14-year-old boy called David, who was in the middle of having his heart operated on when the power went down in the hospital because of the latest round of missile strikes. He was very lucky to make it through. There were power banks, batteries that picked up, and the doctors had head torches on, so they carried on operating, and he was okay. But this sort of thing is happening day in, day out.
I can
morale,
provide you with some statistics. For example, in our hospital, we had like over 275 hours out of electricity for over the last 3 or 4 weeks. So yeah, we had to we had to switch for alternative power generator to actually keep the ICU, to keep surgeries, and to keep all the patients connected to the equipment they need. So it's quite challenging for hospitals, for ordinary people as well. When elevators do not work, and people with disabilities cannot get out of their homes, even to buy some food or even to cook something, as well as, when the electricity is off, the mobile network is also down. So in case of emergency, people cannot even call the ambulance. So it's not only about, having your lights on or out. It's like completely every part of your life is being influenced. So I'm the one that just got a light at my home, because when we were starting, it was a blackout.
It was completely dark. We just could see Madana's nose and her teeth, and we couldn't see the rest of her face. So thank you for that little bit of electricity we've got. Maria, go ahead.
Friends, but that emphasized very important question and answer. Why did Russia try to use this genocidal act against Ukrainian population and continue to target the infrastructure? They were expecting that people will be out on the streets, being, not taking it as a challenge, being a challenge for them, and to say, let's start the peace negotiations. It did not happen. So Putin, again, miscalculated, and we see these heroic doctors, we see these operations rolling, we see a baby girl in the petrol station charging her special machine for breathing. We see all this happening in the 21st century with the international community. We can definitely withstand, and Putin will never put us down on our knees because of this temporary energy crisis. But what I want to emphasize as well, this is bringing us to new understanding that alternative energy is important.
Let me let Rory in here, because you talked about a strategy that may be backfiring. Rory, go ahead.
Well, yeah, what I would say on this is that one of the biggest mistakes that the Kremlin has made over not just this year, but going back at least to 2014, is to seriously misunderstand Ukraine and Ukrainians. They misunderstood it when they thought that following the Maidan revolution, that there would be a rebellion against the Maidan revolution in the east of the country. Pro-Russians would rise up and the Kremlin would only have to support that. It didn't really happen. So basically the Kremlin had to send in troops, undercover, clandestine troops, to make what was happening there look like it was a civil war. They misunderstood Ukrainians again in 2022 with the invasion, when they thought that the country would be too passive to resist. And of course, as we've seen, it wasn't too passive to resist. Its military resisted and its people have resisted. So I think again and again, the Kremlin has looked at Ukraine and got a very wrong picture of what it really is.
Sure.
And at the moment, the Kremlin is thinking that by bombing power stations, power plants, it can break the will of the people. It can set off a new wave of refugees into Europe. It can perhaps change the mind of politicians in European capitals and get them to try and push the governments in Kiev to the negotiating table with Russia. But it doesn't seem to be working. There is no sign at the moment that it is having the desired effect from the point of view of the Kremlin.
Interesting.
That's exactly what I think as well, because, they actually know nothing about Ukrainian spirit and Ukrainian will for freedom and for democracy and for people. They know nothing about people that want to live in a civilized country, and to share the civilized world's values, just like human rights, just democracy, elections, and so on. So they just completely know nothing about the civilized world and the values we share. And another reason, I think, is to make our economy more weak, because it definitely affects the economy, businesses who have to have extra expenses to actually get the alternative energy supplies, and actually have to support people, and everybody's cooperating. However, it actually really tough and hard times for businesses as well.
Okay, so guys, I'm just going to share this. This comes from our audience who are watching right now on YouTube, and Kieran Hannon is asking, Why is there no spokesperson from Russia? He's hearing Ukrainian's perspective, Rory's perspective, no official Russian perspective. We reached out and we tried to include it in this programme, but we were rebuffed. So that is why. I'm going to just transition into the reality of what it's like down on the ground. And so earlier, we spoke to Anna Molina, who is at the Kyiv metro, and I just want you to get a little bit of her experience, because when you live somewhere where you've got electricity and power like this and then you don't, what does that look like? Here's Anna.
I hope there will be no massive destruction, but they waited until the temperature got to -5, -6 degrees Celsius, until it got cold. But we have blankets, sleeping bags, camping gas, and the metro. I believe we will endure it even if they inflict some destruction today.
Maria, so earlier I was looking at President Putin. He was speaking about being on the defensive. He was at Russia's Human Rights Council. I'm going to play what he said because I'm interested in how Ukrainians and Ukrainian politicians like you view it when President Putin makes announcements, makes
about
statements.
human rights.
Yes,
Yeah, that
okay.
sounds very interesting.
Let's take a look.
On our part, there can be only one response: fighting consistently for our national interests. And so, we will be doing exactly this. Nobody should ever count on anything else. Yes, we will be doing it using different means, primarily by peaceful means. But if we have nothing else left, we would defend ourselves using all available means.
So please hear what I'm hearing as a human being and a politician and as being a global citizen, not only Ukrainian. We are the country, we are the aggressor, we are Russian Federation, which will continue conducting war crimes. The crime of aggression, which we conducted already second time in Ukraine, but we did it in Moldova, Georgia, Syria, Afghanistan, other countries. We will continue killing civilians. We will continue targeting infrastructure. We will try to put down all the ties with the West to make the West incapable to react. And that's how we're going to impose our imperialistic sick understanding of how Russia should enlarge itself to the previous borders of the USSR. That's how I hear it in those two sentences. Colleagues, we have to understand how do we address the crime of aggression, because all those war crimes, rapings, killings, 300,000 missing children being deported to the Russian territory and temporarily occupied territory of Ukraine, that would never have happened if not the crime of aggression. That's why we're touring here in DC, going to New York, we've been to Berlin, Paris. We're collecting political support, which is there already to address this crime of aggression in the special tribunal where Putin and the top politicians and top people in the military who have conducted this crime will be responsible. This is the gap of accountability in international law. ICC, International Criminal Court, cannot deal with that, but the international community can. And simultaneously to our amazing military, men and women, by the way, 58,000 women are serving. And yesterday, US Senate approved 800 million financial support for our army, will continue their fight in the battlefield under the freezing conditions. We have to take care about the law, accountability, and justice. And believe us, there's no other person on this world, apart from not only Ukrainians, but everyone needs to see the justice in action.
Maria, I want to talk leadership styles. I'm going to start with Modena, and then I'm going to scoot across to Rory. The person of the year, the Times Person of the Year, is your president. I'm just going to show you what that looks like here. At this point where winter is like, you're in winter right now, just a few days ago, this is what President Zelensky said about winter time, trying to make Ukrainians feel like they are ready for winter. You just have to keep going. This is what he said.
The enemy very much hopes to use winter against us, to make cold winter and hardship part of his terror. We have to do everything to survive this winter, no matter how hard it is. Stand up, and we will stand. To stand this winter is to stand everything. Russia still has missiles and an advantage in artillery. Yes, but we have something that the occupier does not have and will not have. We protect our home, and that gives us the strongest motivation possible.
Madena, it's been 10 months of war leadership from your president. How is he doing? How are you feeling right now as you're in winter?
What makes him a person of the year is that he just represents the entire nation. Our president actually represents the entire nation, which is standing against the outrageous aggression, the military aggression, the biggest one from the times of World War II. So I actually think that he's doing great with keeping our spirit, with actually making us. I'm sorry, my cat just jumped in. So he's doing great with keeping our spirit resistant and actually making us believe that we're gonna stand up and not.
You can make it. I'm just thinking, Rory. You spent so many years in Moscow and reporting on and about Russia, that maybe Ukraine can also weaponize winter against Russians. It could go both ways, couldn't it?
Well, I think if we're talking militarily, then the colder months often are harder for invading armies than they are for defending armies, because for a defending army, you're closer to your supply lines. You can go back to a sort of warm space and get some feeling back in your toes. You can rely on the morale of the population behind you. Russia should know this very well, because Russia has actually benefited from this in the past. Obviously, Napoleon's invading army came up against the Russian winter and didn't do very well. Then the Nazis invading the Soviet Union in the 1940s also came up against the Russian winter and failed on that front too. But this time, it's the Russians who are doing the invading, and it's difficult to say that the winter will defeat the Russians, but certainly the Russians have problems in morale, they have problems in equipment, they have problems in training, and these are all things that Ukraine is doing pretty well at the moment, certainly in terms of morale. The equipment it has is increasingly of NATO quality, and the training it has had recently has been of NATO quality as well. Plus, the initiative and the skills that the Ukrainian army has shown that they have inherently themselves. So I think that the winter months, from things we've seen recently, are not going well for the Russians. I don't know if you've seen, there's videos, not very pleasant ones, all across YouTube and social media of Russians being filmed from drones essentially flying over the top of them in shallow trenches or pits, basically almost being completely unresponsive because they look like they've got hypothermia and they're not doing very well at all. So, I think militarily, how it looks at the moment, the Russians are suffering the winter more than the Ukrainians are.
Well, and actually, speaking about morale, terrorists do not have any morale. And getting back to what Putin said, what's his national interest? Just to destroy everything around the world and to challenge the global peace order. So this is his interest, his personal interest, and that's what they consider the national idea, just to get everyone live like the Russians do, with no civilized rules.
I'm going to leave our conversation there. It's so good to hear from you in Kyiv, and Rory in Kyiv, and Maria actually right here in our stream studio, to actually hear Ukrainians talk about how they feel about the onset of winter and Russia's war in Ukraine. Thank you for all of your YouTube comments as well, and viewers. We really appreciate you. I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.